like I told you, we're going to do this for 4 weeks. Try and guide you towards what your goals are and see, well, what your time commitment is and what we can do within those 4 weeks to sort of get your skills elevated even further than they already are. Your goals, first and foremost. Let's go over your goals. Let's go over that first. Like, what
That's
is
a
the goal
big,
with...
big question.
Yeah.
I've been since last week. I've just been sitting there thinking about all of this, to be honest. But I mean, bottom line, I want to get into concept art. Kind of, I said to myself, obviously being realistic about it, that I wanted to try and start applying to jobs, or at least have a worthy portfolio of my current stuff by the end of this year, which is why I've been going hard on the portfolio cycles. I've been trying to do bits and bobs in between as well as doing my own studies, because I was stuck in that eternal student mindset for a very, very, very long time. It's only this year, after I quit my job in February, that I actually started to try to finish projects and get things done to the point where I can start to, show off everything that I've been working on for the last couple of years. I mean, in terms of just answering that question simply, it's quite a difficult one, because I don't know where I stand in terms of my skill compared to what people want, because I don't really have a point of reference just yet. I do, obviously, when I see other people's work and professionals and stuff, but it's kind of difficult to judge for me personally, because playing the role of a designer and then switching to essentially a director in my own projects is quite difficult for me, which is what I get stuck on a lot. Like with projects, especially like the portfolio stuff that we've been doing, I have a hard time getting off the ground, because I don't really know. I haven't built up that design sense, so to speak, where I know, okay, this has some potential, this hasn't,
Right.
this I need to work on, this I need to change. So I waste a lot of time at the beginnings of projects trying to narrow down a simple idea, but I guess that just comes with practice and mileage and knowing what people want to see. I'm not sure. Yeah.
That's also a little bit of the goal of the portfolio cycles, is to be your own director, because
Mm,
if you direct yourself, you'll be a more valuable concept artist in general.
yeah.
Not relying on always having to go ask your director, hey, is this good? Is this good? Is this good? And sort of it forces you in that mindset of closing door principle. Like, let's just
Mm,
focus on this and move on, which I think you did really well in the Mystoria portfolio cycle.
thank you.
Um, I'll do my assessment first, and then
Please.
we can hear Augie's assessment. So honestly speaking, before Mystoria, for me, you were still a student in terms of level, right? Skill level. After Mystoria, I would definitely see you as a junior concept artist, just because of like the ideas you came up with, the shapes, just interesting characters as well. It's the reason why you won the cycle. Also, it's just there's good design thinking, there's fun, like it's entertaining. That's like a big thing as well. Like you're creating entertaining characters. I would say like a junior position is something that most studios would definitely consider you for. I'd say for me, from a improvement point of view, it would be the clarity in your designs. Like I'm missing some clarity in the overall designs that are still like hard to read. They sometimes still feel like in the thumbnail phase,
Yeah.
like a elaborate thumbnail, let's say. Could be due to time constraint as well.
It
Um,
was. It was a
yeah.
little bit.
But for me, so definitely clarity, some fundamentals as in just figure design that can be improved, but that's something that will come with mileage. But for me, it's particularly that clarity, knowing what projects you're designing it for, really well understanding what the character is designed for, like that archetypal design, and then some like fundamental stuff like adding volume to the character. Even if it's like 2D or very stylized, there's a lot of merit to having it be volumetric, not realistic, but volumetric, so that it's really well understandable for other departments, especially 3D and animation, so they kind of know how things move and they understand what you're trying to convey. Because a flat front view and a flat back view is not really that helpful all the time. Your shapes are really good, like really fun shapes, and I think that's something I hope we can sort of focus on and push. And I think with Augie especially, you'll be able to do that. It'll help you with some of that shape design. And I think for me, that's it. Like it seems fairly obvious that you want to go the character design route, character creature design route, and maybe some props. So that feels like a solid portfolio.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, well, I would essentially agree with everything Antonio said, but I wanna mention a couple of things as well. And I feel like this sort of relates to what Antonio mentioned about kind of going from a student to a junior. At that stage, I think it becomes more about fine-tuning your process. Like if you can figure out how to reliably create designs with a certain pace, then you'll improve essentially. Like that's the goal at this point. Like that's the way that I would phrase it. And of course, that will be supplemented more or less depending on how much time you have and how much you want to commit to fundamental studies. And that's, you probably always do that still. But I think that's a good way to phrase the goal. Is like if you have already these tools that you can wield, how can you kind of shape and kind of wield them more reliably? That's always my thinking. And that will allow you not only to more quickly create the bulk of volume that you need for a portfolio so it has meat, but it will also allow you to just progress in general because you need to create a lot of stuff to progress. So that's the way that I would think about it. And when it comes to sort of the elements that I would consider weaknesses, well, I guess from the other kind of flip side, the strengths are definitely sort of the shape design that you have. And I think in a lot of more like intermediate or beginner type kind of concept art, you see a lack of shape. Specifically, like you see almost like this genericness, and there's none of that here. So I think that's very valuable. Like I think patching up, and primarily what I would patch up or what I would be looking to patch up is in some cases, and I'll see this often in general, is some figure drawing finesse that's lacking kind of drags down the believability. So I think in your case, what I'm seeing specifically is sort of a lack of construction. Let's say like, and some of this you could say is a bit nitpicky, but as an example of that, like for example here, the way that the hand connects and sort of just kind of breaks off, it has a gesture, but the structure lacks so much that that sort of distracts from the quality of the design or the quality of the posing. And kind of similarly, even though this is a very interesting kind of idea of posing, the way that it's executed lacks a little bit of structure, I think, and construction, like following the forms through and connecting them. And that just attracts attention like naturally. So that is one aspect that I'd be looking to work on. And that usually, the way that that usually looks is just like as you design your stuff, you just take moments to bring back the structure. Like, and I'll do this as well. You literally just like draw it through again. Like ask yourself, I'm adding these elements. I'm adding, especially if there's a lot of stuff. Like for example, here you don't see the legs anymore. You might get lost in that complexity. So you stop yourself, and you get into the habit of stopping yourself every once in a while and asking yourself, did I lose the underlying structure? Because there's no real sense in adding complexity and adding layering if that means that you'll lose the figure underneath. And it's not necessarily always underneath, although it often is, but sometimes it's in these, again, like figure drawing things. So from that perspective, kind of, as I mentioned, separated from you getting kind of conditioned to like be able to create reliably, the fundamental side, I think you would benefit from just doing figure drawing pretty much. And I think at this stage, when you have the sort of foundation, the basis in these kind of crucial abilities, the finesse you get just from a lot of mileage. So if you can get into the habit of doing figure drawing as maybe a warm up and add,
I do, yeah.
Yeah,
I try to.
Yeah, and then it's just literally a matter of time, essentially. Like you can't do it. The better you are, the slower it is, the progression. So it just takes a while, but you'll see slowly that the volume adds up, and then it just starts showing through in your images, even if you don't necessarily think about it. But you probably will think about it though, because you are studying that. So apart from that, another thing, and this is also something that Antonio mentioned, but maybe I'd mention it from a slightly different angle, is it seems like you have the design thinking as well, which is also something that lacks the sort of functional design thinking, in the sense of like, how does this actually work in the world? That sort of world building and world building tied to functionality is present. And I think it's great that you have the mindset of it, but it feels like you could follow through on it a little bit more. Like, for example, with these, maybe it's a matter of presentation in this particular case, but it's not necessarily clear that he, for example, carries them because they're so small, and it's also not necessarily clear how he throws them or how they disintegrate, how this actually works. So
Yeah.
like little functional type callouts and specifics, I think you could push on. And then another kind of pushing idea would be in this as well, which is somewhat related in the posing. Like it feels like you're really kind of holding back in certain scenarios. Like for example, if this character is stomping, then you could really have him stomp very much. Or in this case as well, like you could really have him. Although I think this works a lot better. But let's say in this case also maybe you can have, and just as a little drawer.
Yeah, we need to go over some animation principles with you so that you better understand how to push and pull those characters.
Yeah,
because it will inspire the animators. Like the drawing underneath where he's casting, like it doesn't inspire anything about the character. Also, it doesn't show the personality of the character. Like in your hero view, the character has this really flamboyant sort of pose with his hands behind him. So I'm attaching a personality to him, and then when he's casting, all of that flamboyancy is gone. He's just standing there doing this, right? And so that's how we wanna continue, because that's character design. It's first the personality and the archetype, and then bringing that to life through animation and the design. And that's what we want to sort of. I would definitely want to work with you on that. And to Augie's point, like a lot of what Augie's saying is, I think with the world building stuff, it's fine tuning your process. I think that's a great way of putting it. It's fine tuning the process and the world building, and that will elevate this portfolio to a mid artist level instead of a junior.
I tried actually to continue on with the Mystoria stuff because I went to 101. I didn't speak to as many like studios as I would have wanted because I just found it a bit daunting. I'm an anxious wreck when there's people I don't know. So, but I did get dragged over to Atom Hawk by Goose, actually, Stan. Yeah. And they really like the Mystoria stuff as well. But like you're saying, they completely agree with what you're saying in the sense that the designs are cool, but it's lacking the world building, like who's bad, who's good, how do they interact, what do they do. So after getting back, I kind of had a little stab at it. I haven't sent it through, but I basically took each of the characters and attempted to do like little, I don't know what you would even call these, but essentially, I guess actions. Like when you mentioned animations, it kind of completely reminded me of it. Obviously, they are very rough sketches, but I kind of tried to capture what each character would be like through little action poses, I suppose. I don't know. It's the first time I really attempted something like this, so it's rough as hell, but it was really fun. I really enjoyed this part of it, actually.
It is, and and again, this is going in the right direction. But it depends. Like the flaw I would see here, it's great on the storytelling side. That's what I love to see. But if I ask you now, what exact game are these characters made for? You didn't start with that, right?
No.
And like if you're a working professional, you know exactly what the game is gonna be. And every time we do a portfolio cycle, and I keep telling students this, like, know exactly what project you're building your characters for. Make it up yourself, right? We keep it open-ended. But if it's Mystoria, if it's a Zelda type third-person adventure game, then make it that, right? These characters could actually fit for something like that. But the fact that you haven't thought about that makes it ambiguous, right? And so especially now with all the competition you have, if an art director looks at your portfolio and they see like, wow, Pat knows exactly I know exactly from his designs what game this should be implemented in, you're a very useful artist because you know exactly what you're designing for, right? And it can still be new and fresh, but most games have a certain type of character designs that they require, not necessarily on the aesthetic side, but definitely on the functional side, right? A lot of times you see these League of Legends mock-ups, right? A lot of people do them. And they're a bit corny because everyone does them, but it makes very much sense of why you would do them like that. Because you read the silhouette of the character, you know if they're readable in directionality, so the design needs to make sense. So you're making different design decisions based on that gameplay. And you need to do the exact same if you're making an imaginary project. Like, just pick a project and stick to that project and design specifically for the functionality of that project.
I started the project having in my head that it would be a third-person kind of game, and that's kind of what I went with. But then especially after talking to the Atom Pool people and being told about world building, I didn't really know where to take, how to show the world building with having what I've got already. So this was just basically like at this point, I know this is looking more like an animation or something like that than an actual game or anything. But how would the world building is definitely something I struggle with. I could design a character, but then linking it, especially when there's multiple in the same world, that's where the difficulty comes in.
It's because your world is ambiguous, so you want to restrain yourself. Right?
Okay.
Go like to Evan Amundsen's point, right? Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. It's like to a T, writing down exactly what the game's about, how you're gonna play it, right? You don't have to invent the game, but you have to set the rules for the game and just work within those boundaries, because creativity exists within limitation. And if you keep it ambiguous as you are doing now, you're gonna have an ambiguous design. It might still look cool, but to the Atom Hawks people's point, like they don't know where to place you, so to speak, right? And again, that's why I say junior level. You're definitely already good at good shape design and characters and creating interesting characters. But if you can add functionality to it, you're that much more valuable, because you can ask the proper questions. That makes you a valuable team member, asking the proper questions about what the design should be and then designing within those limitations.
Well, that's definitely a skill I haven't grasped just yet. It's difficult a little bit, to be honest. How would I? Right. So restraining the project to criteria, how would that actually look like? So, for example, let's take League of Legends as a. Obviously, I know that's a top-down game. You're going to be looking at the back of the character most of the time, so you want to have clear silhouette design, readability, like you're saying. But
archetypes.
Sure.
There's archetypes. There's magic. It's a magical game, so VFX is going to play a role.
True.
Directionality of your character is going to play a role. They're going to need to design. They're going to need to be designed to have a certain theme, because the theme is going to sell the skins, right? Because you'll have different skins for a character, which means that they have to read thematically, because if you change skins of a character, they still need to look like that character or their embodiment or their personality. It cannot be just any skin on any character, because that's Fortnite. Those aren't characters, those are avatars. That's just put a hamburger on everyone's head, doesn't matter, right? You can do that, but that's not character design, right? Overwatch, same thing. If you have good characters, then the skins still embody the personality of the character. So that's something you think about. Like, what's their theme? What's their unique backstory or something like that, right? So those are the limitations that you can set for yourself, and then see what the specificity is. In Overwatch, for instance, it's a shooter. It's first person. So you're only going to see the character in the loadouts or just before a match, right? Or when you skin them out. And you have more liberty with them. You have some animation, let's say, limitation, but you have some liberty because you're only seeing the front of the character. So the weapon design is going to be more important actually than the character design in terms of what the player sees. But so these are like little things that you can think about to set limitations of how you build your character. So we can, in this session, we can go over like a new project, or we can fine-tune Mystoria and like really put a bounding box on it. Like, what is this game going to be for you specifically for Mystoria, and then build new characters for it.
I think, to be fair, that was what I've written down, to be honest, because I feel like, especially hearing you two talk about it and other people say different stuff, I feel like it's a good foundation in Mystoria to turn into a really good portfolio piece, because I went to 101 basically throwing every project into like a 15-page PDF purely because it's not that I wasn't prepared, but I didn't have any like solid ideas of how to form my portfolio just yet. And out of the 3 projects, everyone gravitated to this one. Okay. I really enjoyed this. And I already thought to myself, it would be cool to expand it, like you're saying, to really make it something as good as it can be.
I want to mention, when it comes to the world building, specifically in games, and maybe let's use this sheet as a specific example. It appears as if, to a certain degree, you're thinking about what the character does, but not necessarily how that affects other characters. And in many cases, or actually, like when it comes to world building in general, distinguishing factor that makes something believable and feel rich is the way that the character interacts with the environment or the world, and the way that the characters interact between each other. And when it comes to video games, that's generally going to be some type of combat most often. And in this case, it's sort of set out very clearly and obviously that this is a boss battle. And so what you have in the sheet, which is good, like a good kind of foundation, is like actual actions, like what does the magic look like. But it's not really clear in this particular example how the magic affects the player, let's say, or the protagonist. Like, for example, if you have this type of an action, then instead of just saying like he stands on sand, you can clarify for yourself this is a way of removing the boss from the player so you can't deal damage. And that way you would already exaggerate, and you could also in the presentation somehow clarify, maybe with just the silhouette of the player, that the boss would now be, immune to damage. And then you could also maybe expand on how he might deal damage from that position, so he might use projectiles then. But right now it's sort of like in the middle. And let's say in this case as well, it's not necessarily like clear what exactly happens, or it might be, for example, expanded upon. Like he can, let's say, deal damage with this. That's somewhat clear, but you could also make it a lot clearer with the silhouette, or maybe you can expand it like he can somehow, like Gaara from Naruto, just cocoon himself and also become immune to damage, or maybe like have a type of an armor for a certain period. That's a specific example when it comes to a boss. But then when it comes to, as I've already mentioned, this one, when it comes to this one, in the presentation itself, which is sort of, I guess, an illustration of the thinking process, you sort of organize things in the sheet the way that you kind of think about them, and you're in the sheet trying to lead somebody else through your thinking process. There's sort of a disconnect between how this actually works as well, as I mentioned. So like, how would this actually deal damage, or how would it transform? How would he be throwing it as well? And so it's not necessarily like a huge difference. It's, I think, in this case, and in this whole sort of broader topic, it's more about the way of thinking. And I think it probably feels more like overwhelming and abstract when you just talk about it. But the idea, I think, hopefully would be to implement the thinking in the process. So as you thumbnail, you would develop the thinking, and it wouldn't be just like disembodied whatever that you have to come up with from the get-go. You would develop it in the thumbnailing, and it would be built in. So it wouldn't be as overwhelming, I think. But that's like an example in that case. And so what you did, for example, here with the callouts, is they don't necessarily feel practical. Some of them might, but also, like, if this is a character in a third person video game, then a lot of these actions, again, as we've already said, feel more like they're for an animation. So it's a little bit of like directing, I think. And when you build it in to your sort of thinking process, it's just going to show through in the final sheets, and in the way that you develop some of the ideas that you already have.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a little bit the problem of form over function is what you're doing now. And to some degree, there's nothing wrong with it, Pat, because like it's impressive, right?
Oh, please be brutal.
No, but at this point, like, and I'm always boggled that this is still a misconception amongst students, that concept art is not about pretty picture making, it's about problem solving. Like, some of the sketches we do for clients are nowhere near the finish you have, but they solve the problem exactly for what the client needs. Right? It's more about function over form, and we can make that as pretty as they want at a later stage. But we understand the project that they need, the problem that they need to solve for a specific case, and that's what we visually problem solve. And you're like what Augie was saying about those little organic bombs, they're literally form over function. They look pretty, and you went for pretty, but they're not solving a problem.
Yeah.
They're creating a problem. So, but it's not a bad thing. It's like just they create questions, and those questions need to be solved. So I think at this point we should like really pinpoint what we're gonna make out of Mystoria, what type of game, and then not fine tune your characters. I would say make new characters, because I want to see new characters come to life. I want to see your ideation process change a little bit. Based on what we've talked now.
Need a bit of help with that.
Yeah. So I think the first thing I want to know is, like, if you could give me 2 projects that you would love to work on as a senior character artist, what would they be? Not companies, by the way, projects.
What, as in existing IPs?
Existing IPs, yes.
Existing IPs. Wow. Okay. I do love the new God of War games. They are fantastic. But at the same time, No Man's Sky. I don't know. Like, in terms of art styles, for example, I appreciate the really realistic stuff, but I wouldn't want to do it purely because even from this project here, I find clean line work so tedious. And making things look like, like a real. I like a bit of stylization. It's just really fun.
Of course, no,
something in between,
Yeah, for sure. No, and also I would say when it comes to projects you love, I would cast aesthetics aside because it's not a good. Because God of War is a great thing because you love the game, right? Like if it was a stylized game, you'd still love it. So I'd say let's think about that. So God of War and then No Man's Sky. Is No Man's Sky because of the style or because of the gameplay?
Oh yeah, no, that was because of the style.
Okay,
yeah.
So let's focus on gameplay. So if we get
God
of War and
wow, what a question. Guild Wars 2.
Okay, so we're definitely in fantasy, which is good for Mystoria, and then we have a third-person narrative adventure game, which is God of War, and Guild Wars is Guild Wars.
It's an RPG.
Is a RPG, MMORPG.
MMORPG.
Yeah, also relative adventure game.
It's a very difficult question, You kind of put me up against the wall with that one.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I play so many games, and I'm just like, there's nothing coming to my head.
No, but they're fairly similar games, I'd say. One is just single player, the other is multiplayer. But they're still to some degree story driven, although Guild Wars is more like World of Warcraft quests like, and multiplayer God of War is very narrative. I don't know, Augie, what do you think? What should we make out of it? What should we make from Mystoria? Should we go like the God of War route, or should we go more RPG?
Yeah, because I guess the distinction would be God of War, and I don't play video games, but I've seen I've seen the gameplay. And so, as far as I understand, God of War is essentially just a series of narrative events.
Yeah.
So it's not as repetitive or I guess mechanical in that sense. You'd have more freedom, and you can think about encounters, I guess, more so than actual preset skills. So I think that with that distinction, you should choose whatever you find more exciting. When you still have complete creative freedom, you should just choose whatever you like the most. So it's a matter of whether you'd want to design, let's say, boss encounters like this very specifically, more like a narrative adventure type way, or whether you'd be interested more in designing skill sets, for example, or specific spells. What interests you more? Because if you choose what you like, you'll just make better stuff.
See, I'm not the biggest fan of props, to be honest. Skill sets is more, in my mind, down the animation route, which, gestural drawing, fun stuff. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's kind of the way I see it. I mean, just sitting here thinking, I feel like some of these characters would, Ratchet and Clank and Zelda, they're quite similar in their play style, and I feel just looking at it, sitting here, that some of these characters would work well, especially the Fox Assassin with the different bombs and stuff. That's right up Ratchet and Clank kind of street, and those kind of games I think are brilliant. Open world exploration. There's lots of fun things to do, different variations and stuff. Maybe down that kind of route would be, it's still third person.
Yep.
It's still got the variety of different characters, different zones, different things to do, interactable stuff, different weapons. Especially looking at the bombs, I'm like,
well, then I'd say let's go that route. Let's go the Zelda route / God of War mechanic wise.
Yeah.
And turn Mystoria into that. And I would say in that case, we're looking for a new hero.
Okay.
Because we're not playing with several heroes. We need one hero. One hero and definitely a boss encounter and one or two enemies. Whoa. What do you think, Augie?
Yeah, either that or some type of an NPC, but I think enemies make more sense.
NPC. No, an NPC is actually good as well. I actually like that you said.
The boring characters.
The boring characters, but they can be very, like a merchant. is
yeah.
a quest giver.
Yeah.
That can definitely be fun. Let's do a merchant.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, let's do the hero, a merchant, and a boss.
That sounds very exciting, to be fair.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of my time commitment, I've got all the time in the world. Unemployment, baby.
Oh, all right. Then let's do another minion
Another
as well.
one.
Literally, like my daily schedule is I work Tuesdays and Fridays for like 3 hours in the morning at a Polish shop. Surprise, surprise. Just to get a couple pennies in the bag. But apart from that, literally, I've got all day, every day.
Let's still do the hero, the merchant, and the boss. Get them to like level me and Augie would want to get them with you, and I think we can get there with you to like a real professional level. Your first task is not going to be design, but it's literally what we do in the studio as well. It's R&D.
Okay.
So it's 2 days of R&D, meaning 2 days of research and not research and design, but research and design thinking, let's say. You're going to write down what the game is. You don't have to invent the game, but you're going to set the mechanics for the game based on what you know from God of War and Zelda. And you're going to set player expectation. So that's what you need. And that means how is the player going to interact with the world, encounter, have gameplay, get rewards, get vanity, also really important. Those are all things because you're also going to create different outfits for your hero because you're creating a hero. Like, it needs to be interesting. So, and you're going to set the limitations as deep as you can. As deep as you can, Pat. So there's like no questions left about what this project is. And based on that, you're going to start your visual research phase, which is, again, the reference building, mood board. You have a style down, so you're fairly close to the Zelda style, but it's not as simplified, I would say. And I wouldn't want to make it as simplified.
No.
If I could art direct it, I would go more towards, let's say, like Overwatch type of stylization for this game, so that we can still add some believability into the things as well. Or I don't know if you know Battle Right.
Yes.
You played Battle Right before?
But it's sort of like a Blizzard type.
Yeah. I've
close to that.
dabbled. Yes.
So in terms of stylization, that would be like this fits it pretty well. And then you're gonna do research based on that and how you're gonna add functionality research for game mechanics, for your characters, for your boss, whatever, and just anything that we expect from a mood board. We have a lot of videos on that on the program, so you can research it. I have it in the Dragon Design course, for instance. You can check it out. How I make a reference board, functionality.
Many times.
So yeah.
Antonio, do you imagine like when you have these three characters that in the reference board or in the research in the document you'd establish already specifically what mechanics each of them will utilize and what kind of archetype they'll be?
I would say, especially for the hero, because like we want to know what their abilities are.
Yeah.
That's fairly obvious for Kratos. It's very obvious for Link as well. And the boss, as like those are the two, because that's where the combat happens. You definitely want to know that, like, very specifically, because that will help you to, like what Augie was saying about the animations of the boss that you had, that wizard. Like, it's not going to be ambiguous anymore. It's going to be very clear. That's what we want to go for.
One thing that I'd mention, and let me know what you think about this, but in the current characters, I think especially this one kind of stands out as like a different aesthetic. Like, this one feels very kind of tribal, whereas this one feels very Egyptian, Middle Eastern, and then this one is sort of like almost dark fantasy-ish, especially with this looks like garlic. I think it also makes sense to, and this is what we talked about in the beginning, to somehow establish the environment, like the setting. That's, I think, maybe even more so than mechanics, what's going to land believability, and the mechanics will revolve around the setting ideally. Like, usually that's a quality of good games as well, is if there's integration between the environment and what the character does, rather than just like, oh, this is a set piece and then the character does whatever unrelated. So I suggest somehow like relating characters' movement and interaction with the environment, but also establishing like either like a cultural or like a climate, some type of an aesthetic within which the characters can fit. And so then in this example, let's say
That's a great point. That's like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
really great point. And this should be in your R&D.
Yeah, and then like you can of course have variation within the narrative and make it make sense. Like this guy could, if he is like in some sort of a barren environment and that's part of the narrative, he could be designed like this. But then you maybe have a gradient towards characters that are still somewhat Middle Eastern or Oriental inspired, but like more rich and vibrant that live in, let's say, like Oasis. So there's a relationship still. There's not like entirely kind of isolated aesthetics, but even if there are multiple aesthetics, they make sense and they fit within the story. So you can have more. I think it's not like, oh, everything has to be like medieval fantasy Europe, but then you just justify it within the map or within the narrative somehow.
See, that's kind of what I tried to do with the Mystoria stuff. Like the Dark Wizard, I basically tried to base on, you know, an invading force. So I kind of tried to base it on Persian themes, you know, the different robes and the turban and stuff. And in terms of the red guy, the barbarian, he was meant to be tribal, and the assassin, I kind of imagined them to be living deeper in the forests. So that's what I tried to capture. But now that you've said that, I do agree that they just don't really feel like they are from the same sphere, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they're cool standalone, but they don't. That's what I struggle with. Like, I can come up with decent shapes, but then, you know, the secondary and the tertiary design elements that bring the world into the character, that's I still trying to figure out how to actually get the point across where they come from.
Yeah, and also to that point, because I really like what Augie said, is like you should simplify, like simplify, because the biggest mistake students or just any artist, even myself included, get into the trap of world building and trying to do the Tolkien world. Like, just pick one area, right? Do your most viable product. Just do the area you want. Focus on that area, right? And that aesthetic. And then later you can branch out and do different aesthetics and different cults and different cultures. So to have visual clarity and to have simplification, let's just go for the most viable product.
Okay.
And pick that.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking for variation, I would rather have it, especially with a more shape or silhouette heavy approach, I'd rather have it in the silhouette itself.
Yes.
Like, for example, within these, the silhouette of this guy and the silhouette of this guy, they're actually quite similar in a sense. You know, the smaller elements are different. There's a cape, but they're both skinny characters. They both have pretty large heads visually, and they both have visually what looks like very short legs because of the type of pants they're wearing. So the big silhouette is very similar, actually. And if you had a vastly different silhouette for this guy and a much more similar sort of cultural aesthetic, you would still get variety, but maintain cohesion where it matters. So I think maybe it's better to look for between characters differences in, first of all, probably size, but then also like big shapes, like fat versus thin, blocky versus sharp. That's sort of like very, very big read.
Yeah, and because you want to go stylized, you can push that, and so try to push it.
Trying. I've like the last couple of months, I basically haven't painted at all. I've just been sketching shapes.
That's great.
Shape design. I mean, the designs that I pulled out for this project compared to, for example, Shattered World, I'm very happy with. In what seems to be a short space of time,
absolutely
whatever I'm doing, it's in the right direction.
Absolutely.
So I'm very happy with how this come out. I'm very glad to be having this opportunity to actually take it further and make it into something even better, because it was a very fun project. You guys are doing great with how you're running the program, and people love it. I mean, I was really surprised at how little people actually submitted projects for this. I was like, 4-week mentorship, only 8 people trying to get winners. I mean, are you kidding?
Well, that's about the effort putting in, Pat. That's always.
I was doing this with a sprained hand as well towards the end.
Well, those are the people that make it, Pat. That's just we can. I said this in Denmark as well. Like, me and Axel and Augie probably as well, have come to a point where in the first 2 months of someone being in Artwod, we can almost certain say that they're gonna make it or not to a professional level. Getting a job is still like a little bit of a networking game, but getting to a professional level, we can almost say in 2 months, based on commitment and mindset. It's very easy to pinpoint.
Oh yeah, it's forged in steel, that kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Pursuit of passion, this, isn't it?
Yeah, and not being afraid of a little bit of that grind mentality and just
No.
going after it, after what you
No.
want.
I've put many hours over the last couple of years, to be honest. When I was working at a warehouse, I would be finishing work at 5, eating, working out, sitting down to draw at 7, in bed by 10, rinse and repeat the next day, getting up at 5:30. And I was stuck with it. I get up at 5:30 even on a Sunday, and it's brilliant. The satisfaction of having done like 6 hours of drawing before people even get up, I'm like, yes.
That is nice, man. That's productivity. I like that.
Yeah, I've been writing so many notes here. That's why I've just been like, so
Anything we need to add, Augie?
Yeah, so we'll meet Thursday next week, right?
Yes.
So after the research, after you establish the mood board, how do you think specifically the pipeline should look? Because what I would suggest is probably, because you're building multiple characters and they're a part of the same project and they will be presented in the same project in the portfolio, there is inevitably going to be comparison between them. So I think it makes sense to build them up together, at least in the very beginning, to thumbnail them together so that you can create this variation. Because I can't know the way that you went about this, but if you create one character all the way through and then you start another one, you're not looking at them together, you're looking at everyone separately. Whereas if you thumbnail them all at once, you will bounce ideas off different characters. So you can think like, oh, this doesn't work for this character, but what if I use that for another? Or what if I use a completely opposite idea for another character? So you can generate ideas when you have multiple characters as well. And if you have them developing at once, you'll also think more about the interaction. So there's a lot of benefit to it. And I think that would be the best thing to do when you start. And then you can zero in on each of them when you have the big ideas. How do you then, Antonio, go about the thumbnailing? Like, does it do any specifics matter?
I would say I'm going to mimic my art director, James, a little bit and say I want to see enough sketches. I don't want to see anything finished, nearly finished, or at all. I want to see sketches and ideations as much as I can. Like, I want to see pages of it. And to Augie's first point, I also want to see live drawings. And I want to see a lot of them, and I want to see 2, 3, and 5 minute live drawings. No 10 minutes, nothing like that. It's going to focus on gesture and good representation of the life of a character. Should we do longer sessions, Augie? That's up to you a little bit. Like, what do you want to see? Because I know you want to see something specific about the live drawing.
Yeah, I think when you do the shorter, I think the shorter ones should take up the bulk of the study. But when you do them, I would focus on, of course, then not anatomy because you don't have time for that, but getting the gesture across and then trying to place the construction upon it while maintaining the gesture.
Yes.
So like just the big ideas. And then I think, and this is maybe optional, but you could also do just hand and feet studies in the same sort of vein, like 2, 3, 5 minutes, very quick, but also just getting the big ideas across, because that's usually where we'll look, and that's usually where people will have issues. That would be the supplement. I wouldn't go more than you can. If you feel like it, if you feel like expanding them, you could do maybe 10, but nothing more, I think, would necessarily help at this stage. I think that would be enough. And I want to also mention, when it comes to the thumbnailing process, I feel like a lot of people that are inexperienced will tend to go through the motions. And so you have, let's say, like Antonio tell you, make a lot of sketches, and then you just go through the motion of making a lot of sketches without necessarily having each sketch, not good necessarily, but with a specific idea. So the way that I often go about it is, it would be very good if every thumbnail that you do had some type of an idea to it, and even if you wrote it down,
like a main overarching theme for the characters.
It should have intent, but that should come out of your R&D.
Yeah, so that's the best term, is intent. Yeah. But the intent, I think it depends on the project, like what will be dominant within the intent, but it doesn't necessarily have to be narrative or shape. Like you can have shape as just, oh, this character is very round, and even with that idea, you push it a lot further than if you just sort of, oh, like visually, I'm just drawing around things, but I'm not really thinking about it. Yeah. So if you could write little notes down with each character, and they can be very broad or very specific, and they can also be very narrative based and very shape based, and then you can develop that further. That would be very helpful. And also, as you thumbnail, I think it's a good idea to develop the reference board. So if you have ideas based on the thumbnailing, it's a very good habit to start looking at the whole process as an organic mass, sort of homogeneous. So it's not like thumbnailing and that it stops and then it's research and it stops, but rather they're sort of one and the same, and you're researching as you thumbnail, and then you have to supplement the inventing with researching. So if you get ideas as you thumbnail and as you write stuff down, I would just create like separate sections, and you don't have to waste like a lot of time on these, but just something as a way to capture the idea so that you can develop it later as you go along. And I think that's very helpful to start kind of, if you don't do it yet, to start getting into the habit of thinking about it like as one thing and as being very intertwined.
I've tried. Like, you should see my pure ref board for Mystoria. It's an absolute mess. Just branching out, like veins going everywhere from it as I was designing the characters. But
I don't like that, by the way. That should be, for me, when it comes to ref boards, there should also be like an area of limitation. And because creativity again exists within limitation, so it's good that you can supplement like you get some inspiration from a sketch that wasn't in your R&D phase. It could be supplemented. Ideally, it supplements something else that you can remove, because you want to have a fine-tuning element on your ref boards. Yeah. That's what we do in our Miro boards as well. It's very box-based, so everything fits a certain area, so our thinking isn't as messy as the Miro board. It's like very clean and it makes sense. And there's like an area for shape language inspiration. There's an area for design thinking. There's an area for cultural theme. Everything like makes sense, and then it comes together, and it's not like a cluster mess of a thing.
Yeah. That's a very good caveat. Is as you develop the reference board, it's not as if, and I'm not trying to say that either. It's not as if you just like endlessly create like tumors upon tumors of reference. There's always structure to it, but both in sort of intent and also like scope. So as you gather reference, it should always be with the clear idea of why you're getting it. So like, oh, this is a section for like overall cultural influence. This is a section for render, finish, or whatever it is that you need. And there's little blocks within it. And then you might have the final block perhaps be something that I stumble upon. And this is maybe a better way to phrase it, is as you thumbnail, you stumble upon an idea or an issue that you might need help with. And in that case, then it makes sense to gather some reference within that section. Is like, I have this particular issue that I can't really figure out, or that I could use some real world anchoring help with. And then I put that in the reference. But it's not like, no thumbnail should have like 15 references for it. That would just be like way overboard. So you should have like limitation to it. But I think you're also, it's a push and pull, but you could be like shooting yourself in the foot if you just like completely close your eyes to expanding the reference board as you thumbnail, because it's not as if you would necessarily like lose out as you're like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're just gonna like go all over the place if you have a bit of like intention when you gather the reference, and the intention will come from the thumbnailing.
Do you have any particular artists that you would recommend looking at in terms of like initial ideas or just rough sketches, ideation? Because right now that's definitely the part where I'm lost the most, in the sense that I just kind of don't really have a direction, just not doodling, but I find it difficult to do not necessarily difficult, but it takes me like a good 10, 15 crappy sketches to actually start getting out decent shapes or interesting ideas. And I'm just kind of wondering if there's anything, or maybe like a art book of a certain game or something that you might have in mind to look at for that first initial stage of the designs, because that's definitely the part that I find the most difficult at this point in time.
I'd rather have you not look at anything.
Hard mode.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're going to be manipulated by those sketches.
Okay.
And you're going to limit your shapes. Either limit your shapes or mimic the shapes. And I don't want that.
Okay.
You should go through those 20, 30 shitty sketches. We all do that, because that's like where the gold nugget is at the end of that road. And then you start free flowing a little bit. And that's where creativity sparks. I wouldn't look at anything specifically.
All right, that makes me feel a bit better.
That doesn't mean, Pat, that there cannot be like game reference in your mood board after you've done your R&D, but I wouldn't look too much at how other artists problem solve.
So just to quickly go over what we've said, I need to spend 2 days or so doing R&D.
2 days at least.
At least.
Not 2 days or so, 2 days at least. I'll tell you what, like,
change my notes.
Me and at Sketch Studio, we take a week of R&D. We don't draw anything, and we do
Really?
only R&D. Yes, we don't draw anything, and we do only R&D.
Wow.
It's like to really understand the project. So I want you
Okay.
to really understand your project. There shouldn't be any questions anymore about what it is and what you're going to do, specifically what you're going to do, because you need a plan.
Cool. So like you were saying, the mechanics, play interactions, encounters, experiences within the worlds,
Overarching cultural theme, like Augie
overarching
said.
cultural theme for a NPC merchant type character, hero, and a boss encounter. Game type Zelda God of War style with Overwatch battle right kind of stylization. And I need to stick to initial ideas for now. Loads and loads of sketches. So many sketches, you're going to be like,
Yes.
watch. You're going to be over. I'm going to just
Yes.
throw it at you. It's hours.
Yes.
And loads of figure drawings as well.
And
which
loads of
is
figure drawings. And do them
Wow.
intermittently. Normally, if you do them right, those figure sketches, they should influence your design sketches.
Okay.
Because you're going to find more interesting poses and better ways to gesture character. And that's going to add interest and personality to the character as well.
So just mix it in a little bit. A few initial ideas, a few figure drawings,
Yes.
intertwine.
You have time anyway, so
I have
you
time.
can spend the morning. You can spend the morning a figure drawing and then do your design thinking. If you want to do your design thinking in the morning, because I like that personally.
Yeah.
A little bit more heavy design thinking in the morning, then you can do your figure sketching in the afternoon. That's up to you.
Sounds like a plan. Written so many notes. I'm ready. I'm excited. It's going to be good. It's going to be very good.
All right, awesome. Looking forward to it. I think that's it for me. I think that's what I want to see in the next week when we reconvene.
I feel a bit overloaded with information, but
that should be.
And I think the reason why the volume is valuable, apart from just the fact that you get better with volume, just like with working on it, it's also only in the volume can we see the tendencies, and it's a lot more valuable to pick out tendencies than it is to pick out specific mistakes. You can't really know what a mistake is versus what is a repeated mistake until you see a lot of repetition. So that's right. I think a big reason why you do volume in general. But also if you'd be planning for 3 characters now, but I think it would be cool if you have time left at the end, you could do a character like an enemy type based around the boss. So that's another
minion,
I think
kind of.
Yeah, so then you'd have almost like a pre-established specific design sense, and also a type of like a design hierarchy where the boss is elaborate, and then based on the boss you'd build something that's less interesting, that has less interest. So that could be like a good addition, rather than doing something entirely separate, like a different character or a different like a mob.
But I think it's good if it's like an add-on at the end, Augie, because it kind of mimics an industry type as well. Like the initial characters have been established. Okay, now we need an extra of this or an extra of this.
Yeah, exactly.
So that'd be good.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much for
looking forward to it.
Giving me this opportunity. Jay, I may not see you right now because I'm a bit like overwhelmed, but I'm very, very, very ecstatic to get started, really, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see the results. All right, cool. We'll leave it here then. If you wanna send us anything intermittently, you can do it in the Discord group.
Yeah, fantastic. I won't try not to overwhelm you too much, but
all right,
I'm sure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.